Just a few months ago, to much anticipation and excitement, Arcane released their last season. It was going to wrap up one of Netflix's biggest shows, a show that meant a lot to people not only in just the storytelling, but also the visuals. And we here at Wing Canvas thought it would be fun to jump in on this excitement and do some of our own fan art. So as someone who enjoys the visuals of Arcane and the show very much, I got tasked with designing a character in the infamous Arcane style, so let's dive in. I think the first thing I'm going to be looking at is how they draw characters. Quickest way to just judge is ask, like, do they do it in a cartoony style or they do it in the realistic style? As I'm looking at all these characters, I'm noticing that, oh, there's like the whole eye mask is here, the brow, but not only that, but like the spacing of proportions are reliant on what we expect out of a Loomis head structure, which is broken up into thirds. But then it's like, oh, why is it not on the complete realistic side? And that's because the way that the eyes are rendered, the size of the lips, even body structure, it's not completely realistic. They're just pushing it a little bit more. So that's kind of how I'm analyzing it, and how I'm going to approach the character is going to be from a very technical standpoint, to break down the underdrawing, to break down the structure of it. The plan for my character was to have a design that would match the world of Arcane. The world of Arcane is meant to feel a little steampunk mixed with a bit of medieval, with a little hint of magic in it, as magic feels like it's just being discovered. Not only that, but the characters in the show are not just humans. Throughout the series, you'll see what look like sea creatures, anthropomorphic characters, and even cyborg-looking type people. So I wanted to have a little fun and design a character that was for the most part human, but with some creature-like features. The initial thought was to base it off of the bat-looking character that was Echo's friend. I really liked the overly large ears and the beast-like look for the character, but as I was coming up with concepts for the character, I partway decided to lean for a more sea-like looking design. That's why the skin ended up looking pretty much just green and turquoisey, with scars on the face giving homage to more land creatures, and a little nod to orcs from things like The Lord of the Rings. Since a lot of the characters from the show are quite gritty, especially those from Zorn, I also wanted a character that felt like they could handle themselves if put into a tough spot and cornered. Someone similar to Vi or Echo, someone who is tough and had a few battle scars and maybe got himself into trouble more times than once. So I did a very quick, rough sketch of our character, and then I did a cleanup version, so this is kind of what it looks like. I do recommend this too, which is use people to give a good reference as to like what your characters can look like, especially if you're doing like a more realistic, rounded character design. So for this guy, kind of referencing a little bit of Robert Pattinson, who did the Batman, and of course he's well known for the Twilight series. But now that I have this rough drawing, I'm gonna walk through how I would block in the painting and everything. So I'm gonna lower the opacity of my line work. It doesn't really matter how low you bring the opacity down, just as long as you can still kind of see it as you're painting it out. Oh, and the brush I'm using is this one. It's called Bristles 2 Flat Rough. I'll kind of use it pretty much for the entire rendering, so you have a rough idea as to how it looks like and how it works. But basically it has a little bit of an opacity. If I press really lightly, you can kind of see it doesn't lay down the entire color. But then I can press harder and it'll lay down the color in like 100%. And if I zoom in, you can see that it has a little bit of like these streaks to it. So it feels still like a textural brush, but it's not super like heavy on the texture. So I quite like it. I think it works quite well. Now, mind you, like whenever I do these, I'm not thinking, oh, this is it. You know, like once it's colored, it's done. You know, sometimes these colors look a certain way, and then once you put in like the colors for the eyes, you put in the colors for the face, you realize like, oh, the colors aren't exactly what you wanted. So I'm always of the mindset that lay down the colors. If it's perfect, then great, you're lucky, you gotta save some time picking out colors. But if it's not perfect, that's also okay, because you can always change them afterwards anyways. So I'm just mostly gonna color the face in with a green color for now. I'm gonna ignore the earrings and all the other little bits on the face. I'm gonna try to keep in mind of how Arcane approaches lighting, how Arcane approaches like rendering the eyes, and like all the characters have eye bags underneath their eyes, so definitely gonna have to add that. Do you want to learn with me and other artists at Wing Canvas for free? Well, this video is packed with highlights from our weekly live streams, so subscribe to join in. Plus, you can download my notes and artwork on our Discord, linked below. What is the difference between shading and rendering? Oh, shading and rendering are closely related, but rendering includes shading as well as texturing and other forms of finishing and polishing in artwork. Shading mainly focuses on light and shadow to define form or show volume. It can be simple or complex like cell shading in cartoons or soft shading in more realistic artwork. Shading is usually the first step in rendering. This is just to separate the elements, kind of like the main elements, so hair, the face, hood, and the jacket and the body. This is so that I just roughly have an idea as to where everything is, and then now we're gonna go in and just shade in all the shadow areas. So I'm basically just trying to map out roughly where things will be, meaning like if I need to change the eye shape after I color and put in the lighting and I realize like, oh, the eye shape looks weird, then obviously I'm gonna adjust it afterwards. Yeah. Okay, and then now we're gonna go into the facial features. So this is something that I tell my students a lot, especially in like my painting mentorship, which is that if you're gonna go for a more realistic coloring or realistic painting approach, do not draw the details, paint in the details. Right now, I want to color in like the eyebrows and kind of like these eye sockets. Again, I can change this afterwards if I realize that the skin tone and the socket placement don't quite feel believable. So I'm just gonna put them here for now, see if it works. If you're enjoying the video so far, consider supporting us as we make free arts education. Join our Patreon, as that will allow you access to special member perks like critiques and classes. Okay, so the next part I'm gonna paint is the shadow under the nose, and I'm just gonna shape and color in the shadow, and I'm following the nose shape, and I'm following how much that muzzle is moving across the mouth. And I'm also gonna shade in where the mouth will be, since the upper lip is going to be cast in shadow, and then the lower lip will also have a bit of a shadow, because remember the lighting is coming from the top. So the entire neck is going to be cast in shadow, and then I'm going to color inside of the ear. So the ear shape is quite complicated inside, but for now, because we're just doing a block in, I'm just simply going to color in kind of the opening of the ear. So you can already see without the outlines that it's slowly coming together. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to carve out this side of the face. And then now I'm going to add a little bit more of the highlights, because the base skin tone, like this color over here, you know, it can be brighter. So for the highlights, I'm actually going to move it closer to green, but I'm going to bring up the saturation a little bit and lighten it. Now, because the lighting scheme is coming from the top, the only parts of the nose that will catch, or the parts of the face that will catch light, will be kind of like the tip of the nose, maybe like the bridge of the nose, and these areas of the face. So after you've blocked these things in, then you can start refining the face, you can start refining where the details are and all that good stuff. Yeah. And I'm going to paint the inside of the eye socket so it's a bit more defined, and I'm kind of carving out the shadows a little bit more. You can do some blending, but I wouldn't spend too much time committing to some blending just yet, just in case you realize that the placements of things are off or the proportions a bit off. Like, you can change it still afterward. Honestly, I would say the important parts of painting is this part. Find references, make sure you understand where the lighting is coming from and how it's impacting the structure of the face. Obviously, if you know how to draw a face and the structure and the different planes of the face, that is going to help a lot when you're painting. And I'm actually going to let you in on a little secret. I actually already worked on this, and this is my first go at it. It's going to look a little bit different from the version that I've already been doing, but this is kind of where I'm trying to get to. But I actually rendered it a little bit more, and this is where I'm at now, currently, with the character. We'll do a little bit of like some cleanup rendering, but I've made the right eye kind of like scarred, so the eye is kind of blind. So that's why this eye is a little bit more watery, it's a little bit brighter, whereas this one's kind of normal. You know, the shadow is still there, so we bring back the original, like the shadow underneath the eye, the highlight there, the dark outline for the eyelids, and the upper lid. Like, they're all there, it's just I've taken a little bit more time to render it. So I'm gonna add just a little bit of texture to the eyebrows, just because if you make the eyebrows just a solid black color, it can feel a little bit too heavy. So I'm just gonna add a little bit of lighting and texture to the hair and to the eyebrows, and I'm also just gonna add like a lighter color above the eyelid color, so that there's again a little bit of just texture and a little bit of nuance. Like, I'm not gonna make this too bright, but there should be a little bit of a highlight like right around the edges of the scar, so that the scars feel quite three-dimensional. Kind of want it dark inside like the crevices and like the pits, but then there should be a little bit of like a highlight. It's definitely a long ways there for this guy over here. There's definitely like, it's a little bit too painterly still. Evening out the brush strokes probably is like one thing I would have to like just get down, just clean up the placement of the lighting, clean up the placement of like the colors and where they are. And here is the final outcome of the painting. I do think it turned out really well, and I really like how the colors turned out, especially when compared to my first attempt at this style. Things like the high contrasted lighting, the shines in the eyes, the saturated colors, and the overall look of the character really came out well. Honestly, I'm really satisfied and kind of surprised at how it turned out, especially since this was way out of the norm in terms of it not being my usual style. But like with all pieces, there's always an itch to add more, and I think if there was some more time, I would have loved to have gone into the jacket and the hair just a little bit more. But the face was the focus, and for that I think it was quite successful, especially when you put side by side my first attempt versus the second one. Join a virtual class in seconds and learn live from professional artists. Enjoy weekly assignments, individual guidance, and real-time feedback on your artwork so you can create like a fearless illustrator. If you learned something new, please like and share this with a fellow art nerd. If you love receiving quality and free arts education, subscribe. Here's a couple other videos you can check out next.